Greetings, viewers of the Cross Moti channel. What do you know about the American motorcycle industry's early days? For the vast majority of people, this knowledge is limited to a few facts about Harley-Davidson and Indian. No matter how you look at it, the contributions of William Harley and the Davidson brothers are well documented, as are the achievements of George Hendy from Indian, Oscar Hedstrom, and Charles Franklin. However, in the early 20th century, there were many other motorcycle brands in the United States which later vanished for various reasons. One of the prominent but much less known figures of that period associated with motorcycles and racing was Glen Hammond Curtis. He was the first to build it in the United States. He was the first to build a V-twin engine motorcycle in the United States, set a remarkable speed record on his machine that was only broken in 1930, and greatly contributed to the development of the American motorcycle industry. And in this episode I want to tell you an interesting story about Curtis and his motorcycles. Enjoy watching. You might be familiar with the name Glen Hammond Curtis associated with early aviation, but did you know that he was also a pioneer in motorcycle engineering? Curtis was born in Hammondsport, New York on May 21, 1878, and from a young age showed an interest in the exact sciences and various mechanisms. Actually, he was quite a typical American youth of that time. It was an era of rapid progress and innovation. In a very short time, a whole range of different technical things appeared and spread, things that just a couple of decades earlier people couldn't even have imagined. The youth of that era were actively curious about all things new. Not like it is now. It's frightening. Electricity, bicycles, engines, photography, telegraph, etc. Even in his youth, Glen worked part-time at the Eastman Dry Plate and Film Company. The company specialized in photography, and Curtis quickly mastered the skills of working with film and gained experience in photography. The young man was also crazy about bicycle racing and generally dreamed of anything that could move fast. He continued photography and learned bicycle repair until the end of the century. In 1899, an important event takes place. Curtis organizes his own bicycle manufacturing business, which he calls the Hercules Bicycle Company. Around these years, a new era of transportation began. Transportation with an internal combustion engine. Cars and motorcycles appear, and since the first motorcycles were born from bicycles, and Curtis was passionate about bicycles and speed, it was perfectly logical that he turned to building motorcycles. Already in the summer of 1900, Glen began experimenting with designing his own motorcycle with the support of his wife's uncle, Frank Neff. In October of the same year, they publicly announced that their single-cylinder motorcycle was almost ready and was undergoing test runs. For his first motorcycle, Curtis used engine components from the company. A 1.5 horsepower engine came out of Buffalo, New York. It was something like a carburetor. Glen made one from a tin can and gauze. Due to capillary action, the fuel gradually evaporated, mixed with air, and entered the engine. The first motorcycle by Curtis wasn't anything outstanding. It had a number of design flaws and low power, which in principle is quite typical for a first attempt. Nevertheless, the inventor rode it around the city. The second prototype, built in 1901, was more powerful, 790cc and 3 horsepower, but turned out to be too heavy. In this rather poor quality photograph, the second prototype is shown with Frank Neff at the wheel. Disappointed with the result, Curtis, with the help of his friend Charles Kirkham, developed a lightweight, powerful single-cylinder engine with a displacement of 347cc and a power output of 2.5 horsepower. This power unit was significantly different from most other engines due to the use of ball bearings, which had a positive effect on both power and durability. A motorcycle with this engine was capable of reaching a maximum speed of about 65 km per hour. The minimum speed was about 7 km per hour. Yes, that's not a very clear specification for a modern motorcyclist. However, we're talking about a motorcycle that doesn't have a clutch or a gearbox, and the drive goes directly from the crankshaft to the rear wheel. The successful 1902 motorcycle led to initial sales, inspiring Glen to establish the Curtis Manufacturing Company. He completely leaves the bicycle business and focuses on motorcycles. Racing was the best way to make a name for yourself, increase fame, and boost sales. The best result in the races of 1902 was third place. For Curtis, that wasn't enough, and the next year he solved the problem in a very predictable way. 2 cylinders with heads were taken and installed at an angle of 50 degrees on one crankcase. Its displacement and power doubled versus the single cylinder, 695 cc and 5 horsepower. The first American twin debuted in May at the New York Motorcycle Club and immediately took first place. Later in 1903, Curtis set the first official speed record of 64 miles at Church. Glen's V-twin immediately became the center of attention in the industry, and other companies wanted to repeat the success. The Orient twin appeared. A year later, the founding fathers of Indian Headstrom and Hendy introduced the racing V-twin. And in 1907, the guys from Harley created such a motorcycle. Davidson Curtis, between 1904 and 1905, took part in all possible competitions, winning most of them and setting a lot of records. He earns the nickname Hellrider during this time and, fueled by success, increases production. The demand for his engine increased, and another new type of transport also attracted great interest from Curtis: air transport, specifically airplanes and dirigibles. Dirigible builders became interested in lightweight and powerful engines and turned to Curtis for help. By the end of 1903, Glen had not only modernized the V-twin, but also created the first American V4 engine for aircraft and a little later, an inline-4. In 1906, Curtis presented a motorcycle with a V4 to the public. By that time, his single and twin-cylinder motorcycles had received a number of improvements: new ignition, new carburetors, and the engine displacement was increased to 500 and 1,000 cubic centimeters, respectively. About 300 engines were shipped to aviators annually, and their appetites and demands were growing. Thomas Scott Baldwin will move his airship manufacturing company to Hammond Sport, closer to Curtis's engines. And another aviator, Charles Oliver Jones, will order an engine from Glen that is unlike any other. Jones needed unprecedented power, and for him, Curtis developed the first American V8. Everything is fine, but at some point he was struck by the idea to put this on a motorcycle and try his luck at the speed record. Curtis significantly reworked the chassis of his motorcycle to fit a huge 90-degree 4.4-liter engine into it. The rider had to be positioned far behind the engine so that he wouldn't burn his knees on the cylinders. The engine produced a maximum of 38 to 40 horsepower at 1,800 revolutions per minute, and the power was transmitted to the rear wheel via a drive shaft. And this monster didn't have any brakes. The goal was to set a speed record, and as for stopping, well, as an option, you could use the engine. Glen was the least concerned about that. The motorcycle was completed in January of 1907. By that time, the last motorcycle speed record belonged to twin Peugeot, 129.55 kilometers per hour. Kilometers per hour. It's worth noting that all speed records at that time were measured in the following way. A control section of a mile or a kilometer was taken, and before reaching this section, the racer would push the machine to its limit. The goal was to fly through the control section while maintaining the highest possible speed. Knowing the distance and the time, it was easy to calculate the required parameter. On January 24, 1907, a motorcycle with a peculiar figure-8 shape was rolled out onto Ormond Beach in Florida. No one was sure that the pilot would be able to control the power and torque. There were also concerns that the human body might not withstand speeds of 200 kilometers per hour. Curtis was pushed up to 60 kilometers per hour on a motorcycle with a tow. He roared and sped toward the control section. Spectators informally timed his progress using stopwatches. He covered the control mile in 26.4 seconds, which meant a speed of 219.45 kilometers per hour. The malfunction occurred when Curtis turned around to make the run in the opposite direction. This is standard practice in record runs to eliminate wind error. While traveling at around 90 miles h, the drive shaft broke, bending the frame. Curtis made an incredible effort to control the motorcycle and stop safely. The damage to the equipment was such that a second record attempt was out of the question. In the near future, the record of 219.45 kilometers per hour was considered and continues to be considered unofficial. However, this did not prevent Glen Curtis from becoming the fastest man on planet Earth. At that time, nothing, not trains nor the newly appeared airplanes, could reach such speeds. Glen's absolute speed record would be surpassed in 1911 and in the context of motorcycles only in 1930. A little later, Curtis personally noted that his S machine could not be classified as a motorcycle because of its engine being too large. Quibbles about which class to classify this motorcycle in seem irrelevant, considering that no car, train or airplane ever came close to the speed he achieved. Bodies sanctioning record runs lacked clear regulations in the early history of motorcycles. There is another interesting model. This is a motorcycle with an engine. This type of layout at the beginning of the 20th century was promoted by the Italian engineer Alessandro Ambrogio Anzani. He installed it on motorcycles and later on airplanes. Since he was involved in aviation circles, he was familiar with the semi-radial 3-cylinder engine. Unlike the 3-cylinder engines of Viconzani, with the cylinders arranged at an angle of 72 degrees, Curtis decided to keep the angle at 50 degrees, like his Vitvin, which made the engine more compact for use in the Curtis motorcycle. The triple debuted in 1909. It is known to have had a displacement of 1,310 cubic centimeters and a power output of around 10 horsepower. The motorcycle accelerated to 90 miles/h. The machine turned out to be extremely interesting, but its performance was only slightly higher than the proven Vitvin, and the high price of $350 limited the number of buyers. In addition, the design, which used one carburetor for the two front cylinders and another one for the rear, created problems with tuning. Production was discontinued, and after a year, no more than 10 units had been built. Toward the end of the decade, further changes took place. Curtis was increasingly moving into engine building and aviation. In 1910, the company was reorganized under a new name. A pioneer of aviation, Agustes Kering joined Curtis as a partner focusing on the development and production of airplanes, promising the public that this would in no way affect motorcycle production. And indeed, the newly formed company released its own motorcycle catalog for the year 1910. In the same year, Glen founded another company, headed by his childhood friend Leonardo Watterson. Unfortunately, the year 1910 marked the decline of motorcycles, and the Curtis-Herring partnership deteriorated and soon fell apart. The production of motorcycles and engines on a smaller scale was transferred to the factory to preserve the brand and fulfill existing orders. By the year 1912, the motorcycle market was dominated by the first, for example, producing about 30,000 two-wheelers in a year. A small company found itself up against giants. Glen focused on aviation and engines, investing all his finances in this direction. In 1913, Curtis placed an ad in a magazine announcing the end of production, putting the entire range of motorcycles, parts, and tools up for sale. This marked the end of the story of Glen Hammond Curtis's motorcycles. These 12 years of engineering left an indelible mark on the industry. He was a bold innovator, and in many ways his technical solutions set the direction for the development of several industries. Today, the Curtis brand has been revived, producing a range of luxury motorcycles. But that's another story. My friends, my story is nearing its conclusion. If you enjoyed this story, you likely know what to do next. You can write a comment, share it with your good friends and acquaintances, and subscribe so you don't miss new episodes. I would especially like to thank the viewers who support my work financially, using the details provided in the description. As usual, this was the CrossMoto channel. See you next time.